Hello, welcome to Jessie James Beads. How are you doing today? It is the 5th of October. How is it already fall or autumn as we know it here in the UK? How has that happened? Seconds ago it was summer. I don't understand. It's whizzing by. How have you been today? Are you having a lovely day? Have you been creative? Have you managed to see family or friends? You're catching up on things that you must do. Did you notice my bangle? We might be making that today on our lovely live broadcast with Jessie James Beads here on Facebook. After the video has ended, it will be available on replay on Facebook. If you go to videos, you'll be able to find it easily. It'll also head over to the blog and to YouTube in a few days' time. So for the video today, we are going to be working with Into the Woods. Now what a glorious mega bead collection this is. Celia is in. How is the weather in Lancashire? It's been a bit miserable today, but I've been told by lots of customers today that it's going to be the most beautiful 4 days coming up over the weekend. So fingers crossed it's going to be sunny and delightful for you too. Can you see me and hear me okay? It's always a bit of a worry when you're your own producer and director and lighting guy and sound guy and camera guy. Is it working? I do hope so. Would you like to have a quick look at the bead mix whilst we're waiting for people to join us? It's cold and wet in Lancashire today. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, my darling. Hopefully tomorrow will be better for you too. Let's have a look at the beads. So this is the name of the bead mix. This is known as a mega bead mix, and I've popped the link to this bead mix in the video description so you can head over and collect one of those for yourself. It's an absolute stunner. Now what you see in my little dish just here is nowhere near what you get in the box. This is what's left after I've made a project. I'm having a moment because I love the sound of beads in a ceramic dish. It's fabulous. So let's take a quick look at the Into the Woods mega bead mix. You've got these absolutely gorgeous bronze toned metallics, so you can use them in multi-directions. It's really clever when you have options like this. They're gorgeous. You can thread through, you can use them as connectors even. So you've got a couple of those. You've got these gorgeous teardrop shape two-tone glass, I want to say, beads. So they're drilled top to bottom, and they're golden toned around the edges and that lovely smoky colour in the centre. You get 4 of those in the mix. You get these absolutely fantastic barrel beads. Now these are sumptuous gold with a lighter tone to boot, and this fabulous geometric design. You get 4 of those as well. You get some of my favourite beads ever from Jessie James in this mix. You get these gorgeous, are they hexagons? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I don't know, I can't count. I think they're hexagons. They are absolutely fantastic, and you've got a multi-tonal effect there. Love the colours, says Marlene. Welcome to today's live. I hope you're very well today. You get a handful of these little owls. Absolutely adore these guys. They're a very deep golden, kind of a rich antique colour, which doesn't show as well on screen as it appears in real life. These again are some absolutely sumptuous zigzag step faceted beads. I think they're a glass crystal. Hello to Linda, how are you? Love the heck too. How are you, darling? I hope that you are well. You have these fantastic ceramic beads, and you do get more than I'm showing you. This is just a little bit of a taste of this fantastic bead mix. And just to remind you, this is the name. I've popped a link in the video description. Janita is in. Hello and welcome. Hello to you. Let's pop these into the box for now. So gosh, you get 4 of my favourite. Absolute gorgeous. Love those two-tone glass. You get several of these. There's at least 5 I can see. There must be one more somewhere else. You've got squirrels, or as we like to call them in my family, squizzles. If you say the word squirrel, my dogs go absolutely bonkers for them, so we perhaps won't. You've got these fun I don't know if they're lucite, they might be something similar, dimpled pink beads, which really do add a little bit of glamour. Do love those. You've got these clay rhinestone encrusted rounds, they're fantastic. We've already talked about some of these. You do also get the smaller golden owl, and you get what I like to think of as acorn toppers. Little acorn toppers. They're not, of course, they're bead caps, but you know, I like to have my little imagination run away. These are fantastic. So you could very, very simply pop these on a pair of ear wires. You have the option of adding a further bead down underneath if you wanted to. Can't beat those Jessie James bead sets, says Linda. You're so right there, my darling. Helen has joined us. Hello, Helen. How are you, sweet pea? I hope that you are well. Now, there's a handful of beads that I've drawn out of the mix to work with today. One of those bead caps, one of these knobbly bobbly saucer spacers in that lovely antique gold colour, one of those ceramic beads, and one of these really super fun, it's like a coiled coil. Like a gizmoed dude. I don't know what it's called, to be perfectly honest. Love it, though. You get a number of those in the bead mix as well. So those are the ones I'm going to be demonstrating with today. But don't forget that in addition to all of the ones that you get in that box just there, you've also got what I've made in the project. Everything on this bangle came in our bead mix today. Now, the reason the focus is a little bit off is because when I lift the work up, this is where I want it to be in focus for you. So if I drop that down, a little bit blurry, lift it back up, I need you to see what it is I'm making. So if I just hold that up for a moment, what we're going to be learning how to make is these little, I think of them as acorn inspired charms. And it's a way that you can take a drilled bead and add a little bit extra to it. I've also used a bunch of these gorgeous metallic acorns as well. Gizmo Dude. Can we call them that? Can we all agree that these are now called Gizmo Dude? We'll petition Sarah when she's back from honeymoon to rename them. They're Gizmo Dude. If you haven't seen Free Guy, it's a Ryan Reynolds film. It's very funny. It's set in the world of computer games, and there's a gentleman in that called Guy. And I don't know, Dude is another one. I am just inspired to call this a Gizmo Dude now. There we are. So you've got more of those bead caps that we talked about. You've got more owls. You've got the acorns. You've got these fantastic cube beads, which I used all of in the bangle design. You've also got Sarah, Gizmo Dude, yes! You've got these fabulous purple, I'm going to refer to them as faux pearls. I love the contrast of purple with all of the bronze and gold metallics, those autumnal fall colours, alongside the two-tone faceted cubes, which are both a metallic and a purple over the top. So that's the project we're going to work on together. You've seen some of the beads that we have in this gorgeous bead mix. Does that show up in the corner there? Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Okay, so the wire that we're going to be working with is 18 gauge round. I'm working with copper because it's one of my favourite metals to work with. You can work with a medium temper or a soft temper. There are pros and cons to both of those. If you're going to work with a medium temper, you need to really warm it through. So let's grab that first section. This is around about 7 inches. Hello to Anne from California. Welcome. How's the weather in California today? We've agreed that in Blighty today it's chilly and nasty, but it'll be better tomorrow. So 7 or so inches of that 18 gauge round wire. Just pop that over a little bit further so I don't send it flying. And I'm going to give that a really nice warm through. If you're working with a softer wire, you will need to harden it slightly. But if you're working with a medium wire, as I am today, you'll need to soften it before you start forming it. So I'll show you both of those techniques as we run through the process. So first thing I'm going to do is check that the end is nice and flush. This end is nicely flush cut already, so I won't waste any more. The first tool we're going to use today is the round nose plier. I'm working with my Beadalon Basics. They are absolutely fantastic. Pop the end of the wire into the tip of the pliers and start rotating that around to create a small round form. So if I just show you that over the surface, I haven't completed the round form. what I'm going to do is push that against my non-dominant finger. 26 degrees in California, that sounds perfect for me. Absolutely perfect. Better than the 12 degrees I've got right now, which is a bit rubbish, to be fair. So what I'm going to do is to create a spiral, and I'm not going to overly worry about making that nice and neat and tidy. It can be neat and tidy, that's absolutely fine, but it doesn't have to be. You can make a basic circle in a circle in a circle. And I'm going to rotate around that central aperture a good 4 times before I think about doing anything else. Now, what can happen when you're new to making spirals like this is that they can be a little bit gappy. You can get gaps between those passes of wire as they rotate round. Can you see there's just one just here? You can see the gap. That in this design simply doesn't matter. So if you're working with a soft wire, before you move on to the next stage, we're going to work harden very gently by doing a process I lovingly refer to as omnomming. So I'm opening and closing the pliers, and I'm putting a little pressure, but I'm not squashing it, and I'm just adding a little bit of hardness to that wire in that coil. So I've rotated 4 times around that central section, and for the bead we're going to work with, which is the Gizmo Dude, that's going to be a really good size. If you're going to work with one of the giant beads from another bead mix, let me just grab another one from the fall collection. So this was Cider House, and I debated making this project with both the gorgeous bead mix that we're working with now, which is Into the Woods. I almost added Cider House in as well, because these will make the most fantastic acorns. They're almost the size of conkers. So that's another beautiful bead mix to consider adding to your collection. The colours between Into the Woods and Cider House are very complementary. So have a look at that when you're checking out your Into the Woods bead mix. So I've just added a little bit of hardness to this spiral in a spiral in a spiral in a spiral. And we're going to grab those basic round nose pliers again. Now this technique takes a little bit of practice, but it's really cool because you can turn any bead into a charm. What we're going to do is to use the one side, or I like to think of them as tines. You know, like the prongs on a fork are called tines. I like to think of these as tines. It's probably not the correct technical word, but I'm not known for using correct technical words anyway. So we're going to pop that spiral on to that half of a plier, prong or tine, and what we're going to do is just use our fingernails to open that spiral out gently, one little section that rotates around at a time. And if I just open that all the way for now, you'll see that we've got a little bit of a coil cone going on. So it gets easier with practice. So if you've got a couple of inches of scrap wire on your bench and you want to try something out and you're not too worried because you've already kind of used the majority of the wire, then this is a really cool technique to get into your arsenal of wire working techniques. Love the bigger beads as well as the Gizmo Dude. Yeah, they're beautiful. They're absolutely gorgeous. So you've got your opened out spiral coil, and what you may find is that one side doesn't quite open out how you want to, so don't be afraid to get in there with your pliers and just open that out a little bit more if you need to. If it comes out too far, you can compress that slightly as well. When you're happy with how the little spirally cup or acorn holder, I'm just going to close that back up again a little bit. There we go, that looks better. The next thing we're going to do is where the wire starts to move away from the circular form, I'm just going to grip hold of that section of wire and pull the tail of the wire back across the middle of the design. So if I show you that sideways, it's just moving across the middle, and it's quite important that it goes across the dead centre. Deborah is in Senicha. I'll get it right one day. Senicha. I want to say Senicha. I'm terribly bad at pronunciations of place names, so I'm terribly sorry about that if I've got it wrong, Deborah, and welcome to you. So your wire is passing across the middle of your opened out little spiral or coil or acorn cup. And what we want to do is to grip that wire just before it meets the halfway across point, like so, and then we're just going to push that wire up and away. So we've made a little bit of a basket. and we've now got that upright bend. Now don't be afraid to get that wire exactly where you want it to be. Tell it where you want it to be and it will listen. Because we super warmed this wire earlier, it's going to behave itself, and if it doesn't, you've got more wire. It's not the end of the world. Now the next part of this technique, which I'm going to teach twice today, just because I want you to kind of see it. If it can go wrong, I'll make it go wrong for you. Good afternoon from a rainy Indiana. Good afternoon to you, Rebecca, and welcome. Or are you Rebecca Lynn if you prefer? Cara says, what size wire? We're currently working with 18 gauge round, and you can use either a medium or a soft temper. If you're working with a medium temper, make sure that it's thoroughly warmed through before you start asking it to do things. And if you're working with a softer wire, once you get those coils all the way around, give them a bit of a squish to work harden them. So the next thing we're going to do, you can see this little bar of wire that comes from the outside of the largest coil into the middle of the design. We're just going to very gently push that down inside the basket, and this is why I'm teaching it twice, to make sure that you can see this process. What we're going to do is grip across just that little bar and push it down inside the basket, and then we're going to pull that wire back up straight. So you may find that your coils open up or close a little bit more than you want to, but it's really quite simple to just pull them back into position. So the bar that went from the outside coil to the middle section where the wire starts coming away is now pointed down slightly, and that's so that we can sit our gizmo dude, which is what this bead is now called. Let's get that sitting on to the wire. Slide that all the way down into position. So in my little tiny brain, this kind of reminded me of an acorn in an acorn cup, or a pixie hat, if that's how you think of them. So again, you might want to open it out, you might want to close it up, get it to sit exactly how you want it to. Now I appreciate that's not exactly what an acorn looks like, but I loved the technique and I loved the acorns in this gorgeous bead mix. So I am going to show you the technique over and over again. Well, not over and over again. I'm going to show you for a second time, and then I'll show you the examples that I made. So I have them in silver colour wire here, so you can really see how the beads sit inside the design. It's just a really fun way to use up individual beads and add a little bit more to them. If you've just got a single bead and you want to make something that's not just threaded onto a head pin, you can make your little acorn cups or little coils, little spirals, whatever you want to think of them. So for the next part of the tutorial, we're going to put a bend in that wire again. If I can show you this from underneath, actually, that would be better. So I'm making sure that Gizmo Dude, or whatever bead you're choosing, is sitting down into the little acorn cup. I'm going to pull that wire away to the side. Now I've got a fair idea of what it takes to make a single loop. So if I wanted to make a simple single loop, I would trim my wire away to around about somewhere between a quarter of an inch, just slightly larger than a quarter of an inch. So I'll show you on this design how to make it into a wrapped loop, but you also have the option to make it into a simple loop. In fact, let's make this one into the simple loop and I'll do the next one as a wrapped loop. So I'm trimming here, and I've got this scrap of wire which I can use for practicing something else later. So I've got this little stubby tail of wire now. I'm going to pop my round nose pliers on, and I'm just going to rotate that around until I get a simple loop. Now if you're making a pair of earrings, a simple loop is usually adequate to support the weight of a bead. If you are making a bracelet, having a wrapped loop can often be quite helpful because you're much more likely to catch a bracelet on something than you are an earring. So once I've got that loop, that simple loop, looking how I want it to look, I'm going to give it a really hearty squish. If you struggle with gripping your pliers and you need just a little bit more pressure behind that grip, you can pop your pliers down onto the desk like so, and just gently support them whilst you press down with your hand. And in that way you can usually get a bit more pressure if you're struggling, if you've got sore wrists or something. So there's one using the Gizmo Dude bead. I think they're really cute, but it doesn't just have to be for acorn feeling designs. Now you might notice that in this section on the demonstration piece, I'll just lift that up so it's in the focal length of the camera, I added one of those bead caps, which I forgot to do today, but I'm not going to worry about it because I've got time to show you this a couple of times. So you can add one of those fun little bead caps if you want to. They are a little bit acorny, but you don't have to if you don't want to. So there's our bangle up in the corner. Let's put the gizmo dude back over there. Now if I wanted to work with a slightly larger bead, and I absolutely adore these ceramic beads, they are gorgeous, I might put the bead cap on this one instead, and then I can show you the wrapped loop. So this end of the wire hasn't been trimmed, and again it's 18 gauge round wire. Now the reason I hold the wire in position whilst I'm trimming is not because I want to trim bits of my finger off. I really don't want that for myself or for you, so take care. But it helps me to control the last little bit of wire that I'm trimming away so it doesn't ping up and into my camera, because those things aren't cheap. So again, I've got a slightly longer piece of wire this time actually. This is probably closer to 8 inches and it's a medium copper wire. And if you need to, you work with a medium or a hard temper. Getting that smoothed and warmed through will really help you. So I've trimmed the end away. Roberta, welcome. Welcome, beady friends. Late to the party, but happy to be here. We're happy that you're here with us. Don't fret, because we're going to show you the whole process again. Now, for the little beady dude, which is, Roberta, what we've decided this gizmo coiled little fella's called. It's a beady dude now. Going to campaign for Sarah to change its name. We are going to, instead of doing 4 rotations on the coil as we did for Beady Dude, we're going to go for 5 rotations because we're working with a slightly larger bead. So I'm going to start by bringing that wire around into the beginning of a round form, and you'll notice that I'm leaving a gap. That's because if I leave the gap, it's much easier for me to grip that arc and push the wire around. If you make the complete circle, it often makes more of an oval when you start bringing the second pass of wire around that central aperture. So just take your time and coils become easier. Now I'm going to make small movements and push the pliers and my non-dominant hand together. The slower you make coils, the better your coils are. The more you practice with teeny tiny offcuts of wire on your desk, the better your coils will get. So I'm just going to take my time. We've gone for 3 rotations so far even. I can say words like a professional. And let's keep going, let's keep going, let's keep going. What have we got now? We've got 4 rotations of wire. We'll go for maybe 5, maybe 4.5. I think actually that's probably large enough. So if you were here for the first demonstration, you may remember that if you're using a soft wire to create this piece, you will need to just gently work harden, opening and closing or omnomming your flat facing pliers, just to give that a little bit more rigidity. I learned something new in making coils, so they are round and not oval. It's just helpful to practice with scrap wire, not worry about making them very, very quickly. The slower you make them, the better they are. Like sourdough bread. So that's been work hardened now, so we're going to move on to turning this into a little bit of an acorn cup, or a pointy coil that comes away a little bit like the shape that you find on your pliers. So let's pop the one side of those round nose pliers in, and I'll try to show you this as sideways as possible. What we're going to do is to control, so I'm pulling the spiral down towards me and I'm just opening up a little bit at a time. So we have a thing on the beach in Britain called a helter-skelter. I don't know if you have them at carnivals and the such United States. But it's a ride where you go up some stairs in the middle of a tall, I won't say building, it's not really a very structural thing, and then you get on a slide and the slide goes round and round and it looks like this. So they're called helter-skelters here. Don't know if they're called the same thing stateside. So we've got this little helter-skelter. I'm going to call it a helter-skelter. And what we need to do now is to take the tail of wire that comes away from our springy helter-skelter. I'm going to put my pliers across that wire as it moves away and draw that so that it passes across the centre of the largest part of the spiral. Let's just poke the mouse so that it wakes up again. Yep, that's good. And what we need to do is to make sure that that wire passes across the very centre of the outer spiral. So you can see that it's moving across sideways there. And then if I pinch the wire just before it makes the halfway point, I'm going to push that up and away so that it's almost on the end. It could be a pine cone as well, actually, if you think about it hard enough. It could be whatever you want it to be. So now we have this bend in the wire coming up and away. The next thing we need to do is to push this little bar, this small section of sideways wire. It's 18 gauge round wire. We're going to push this down into the middle of that coil. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can control the outside spiral and push down on this end section. My preference is to just grip hold of the bar and push it down inside. So when you do this, you can see that that's now sitting inside the coiled spiral. You may find that you slightly draw everything out of shape, so don't worry, everything is rescuable. My pliers often ping off the end, so let me just grip that bar and draw the wire back up through the centre. You are very welcome, my darling. So pushing that down into the middle, and then you may find that you want to just slightly adapt that spring. Because we work hardened it, once you push it to where you want it to go, it's quite likely to stay there. So we've got our little acorn cup, or whatever you want to think of it as. Now just need to make sure that this next section is good and straight. So I'm going to add on my large ceramic bead now. Slide that all the way down so that it sits inside the top. And if you want to, you can even bring that spiral up a bit so that it sits closer around the edge and you get more of an acorn feeling. Doesn't really matter if you do or not, I just like the idea of it. The next thing we're going to do, thank you so much Linda, that's very kind of you, is pop the little bead cap over the top. So on my demonstration piece I did that on the little gizmo dude, but you don't have to have a bead cap. On this one I made it solely with the golden saucer spacer bead, which I think are absolutely delightful. So I'm going to show you how to do a wrapped loop on this one. If you've never seen a wrapped loop, then I will show you how to do that very easily now. Roberta says it's like a mini ice cream cone. It is. What would your flavour be? I'm feeling, actually, because we're in October, cinnamon. I quite like the idea of cinnamon ice cream. I frequently have cinnamon on my coffee. Still drinking iced coffee. So what we're going to do for a wrapped loop, do you remember with the gizmo dude, we brought the wire directly over the moment it came out of the top of the bead? When we're doing a wrapped loop, we need to allow a little space between the right angles. If I push that wire over, show you sideways, we've got a little bit of a gap just here. Is there a way to put the bead inside the spiral so it's caged all the way round? You can. You absolutely can. I could show you that actually as a little extra. What a good idea. Okay. Right, we'll have to think about how to do that. Let's first of all do this wrapped loop. So rotate the round pliers around until you get that circular form at the top. Squish that down slightly. You can make the loop a little bit smaller if you want to go on a bangle. I'm making it large so that you can see it easily. And then we just draw that tail of wire around until we fill the gap. Give it a squish and a squeeze. We're against the metal of that bead cap, so I'm not worried about hurting a bead. And then we're going to trim away the last inch or so of wire. So you can even practice your coils with something as small as an inch of wire. You can practice starting them, and if all you were going to do is put it in the bin anyway, does it matter if it goes a bit wrong? Just keep practicing until it goes a bit more right. So there's another alternative for your little ice cream or hazelnut. That's not right, is it? It's an acorn. I get hazelnuts and acorns mixed up. So you've got a little bit of a spiral that goes all the way round there. So what you can do, it's going to look slightly different. Thinking on the fly here, let me grab some more wire. Do like a nice little challenge now and again. So I'm going to still work with 18 gauge wire. Remind me to show you how to finish the ends of the bangle when we get there. Before I leave you today, do remind me to show you how to seal the bangle all together. So the first thing we would do then is to check that the end was nice and smoothly cut. Let's give that a quick warm through. I wonder if I've got another one of those ceramic beads in the mix. Oh gosh, there is one. Winner. Let's go for it. Okay, so end of the wire again. So for the third time, we're going to make a spiral. I think it needs to have quite a large gap in the middle. So you can give that a squish when you're happy with the shape. It'll help you to form the rest of the spiral. So I'm going to do this quite quickly because it's the third time I've shown you spiraling now. Obviously, what I've said still stands. The slower you go, the better it is. So if we move this along quite quickly, like so, what we're going to do is give that a quick work harden. Let's take that all the way around for one last bit. So if you rush, that's what happens. You get baggy spirals. Nobody wants baggy spirals. Take that all the way around, and I'm going to trim that right at the edge now. Thinking on the fly, don't know if this is going to work. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. So let's make a freestanding spiral. So again, just control the descent of the wire by doing one spiral turn at a time. And you can manually adjust this later with your pliers. So let's just take that off. And what I'm going to do is just very gently bring that end section in. This is like challenge gem, this. Bring that in slightly so that it sits neatly against the previous spiral. Then what we're going to do is make a teeny tiny spiral now. So let's grab those round nose pliers again. That's nice and flush, that's fine. Teeny tiny loop. In fact, I think we'll go for a loop on the bottom, and then you could add another bead if you wanted to. And if you don't want to, you can just turn that up. So let's give that a lovely smooth to make sure it's nice and straight. And then we're going to feed the wire with the loop on the end through the base of that spiral and add the bead down into the top, and you can just draw that up a little bit more. And then if you want to, you can close up the lower section of that spiral like so. I do have a dedicated video for showing you how to make beaded spiral cages. It's on my YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and you look for @GemHawks, that's Gem, J-E-M, Hawks, H-A-W-K-E-S, you can sit that bead down inside the spiral like so. Why don't we see if there's another bead cap? Let's have a look. I'm not sure if there are any more or not. Oh, there is one, lucky. So if we add that on, slide that down, and then we'll do a little wrapped loop at the top, and you can see you've got a tiny little loop right down at the bottom, Roberta, which you can add other beads into, and that will just hold everything together. So let's go for a simple loop. You've seen wrapped loops. Let's go for a simple loop on this one. So that pushes directly over the moment it comes out of the top of the bead cap. A second way of making that simple loop, if you're not sure how much wire it will take, is to start forming that loop. That's gone slightly over to one side, so I'm just going to pull that around a little bit. And then you can trim that wire when you're happy with the size of your simple loop. Do look twice, and then you'll sob much less. There you've got your simple loop up at the top. So that's just another alternative. Hazel's just joined us, missed the beginning and the middle, but don't fret, pet, you can catch us on replay. You'll also be able to catch up on the blog, the Jessie James Beads blog, and on Jessie James Beads on the YouTube also. So in order to close up your bangle, I'm not going to load lots of beads on because I want to use them, frankly. You're very welcome, Roberta, no problem. So let's say that you've put all of your beads onto your bangle, and this is a very mini bangle. It's not fit for adult wrists. Whoops. Hello Janet, how are you? Welcome to Jessie James Beads. Let's say you've put all your beads on, and what we need to do is assess the size of the bangle. So I'm going to allow at least ½ an inch on either end more than the size of the hand that a closed bangle needs to go over. So this bangle is in fact a little bit large for me. So when you're creating for an individual, you would take the measurement across the palm. If you also need to check that your client is able to tuck their thumb away like so. If they're unable to tuck their thumb away, a closed bangle might not be the correct piece of jewellery. I'm quite flexible, so my thumb goes all the way over there and I can wear quite a small bangle because I can tuck my thumb away. So you need to make sure that you've got ½ an inch of wire at either end, so an inch extra overall. And we're going to turn that into a connection so that you can wear your closed bangle. There's no point making a bangle if it's not going to fit on your hand. So I'm just going to trim away the little section of scruffy wire just here. As I mentioned earlier, when I'm trimming wire on screen, I'm trimming it in a way that prevents the wire from flicking up and either going in my eye or hitting the camera. So please be very, very careful when you're operating your cutters, your flush cutters, that you don't trim your finger. We do not want you to trim your finger. So I'm going to allow, now let's actually measure the distance that it will take to make a small wrapped loop. I've said ½ an inch, let's grab a ruler. Yep, I think we can probably do that in ½ an inch. You can go for simple loops, but they do risk being pulled apart. So around about ½ an inch at either end, and I'm going to turn the wire in one direction on one side. So that's coming over like so. And we'll make that first little loop. So rotate the wire around. You've got a tiny tail on the end to just tuck over. So I'm leaving a very small amount of wire to go around the core. The core is the wire that goes through the centre of the beads. So I use 2 sets of pliers when I'm working with teeny tiny bits of wire like this. I'm going to support that first loop, and then I'm going to draw the second section around. Also going to knock the camera because it's there. And we're just going to tuck that tail just very, very gently around the core. Now you can make your life much easier by using more than ½ an inch at either end. If you go for an inch, it gives you much more space and it makes it a little bit easier to control. I'm being thrifty with my wire today. So let's just close that last little bit up, and that will form a secure closure with minimal wastage. If you work with precious metals, if you work with sterling silver or gold wire or something like that, every little bit that you cut away is a bit that you can't then use. So I tend to measure for the smallest amount of wire necessary. So that has formed a loop which is effective. Now to create the other loop, we want it to be turning in the opposite direction. So that means if I grip my bangle wire like so, what I'm going to do is push this down and into the centre of the bangle. And I'm going to make the first half of that simple shape. So I'm not going to make the whole circular form, I'm only going to go for a shepherd's crook. So what we're going to do then is pop that through the loop we've already formed. Now what can happen here when you're pulling the wire around is that you slightly lose the shape of your bangle. So I pre-warmed this, but I didn't harden it in the circular form. So before you add your beads, if you're happy with the size and you've left, let's say, maybe 3/4 of an inch will make your life slightly easier on either end, do harden that bangle before you start pulling it around. It will just last a little bit longer. So what we're going to do now is to pull that tail over the top and around. I'm trying to do this in a way that's easy for you to see. It looks like it's difficult. It's not difficult. It's difficult to show you. So I've completed that loop freehand. Now I'm not pressing down where the 2 wires cross over. I'm pressing down over the 2 halves. So I'm just going to push that around to begin with before it gets too spiky on my thumb. Then I'm going to support across that loop again, and bring that last little bit of a tail up. So let's just bring that over the top, and you have got yourself a tiny, tiny wrapped loop. Now these are only just wrapped loops. They barely make it. But like I say, if you're looking to be thrifty because you're working with precious metal, every little bit that you don't trim away, I'll show you my scrap pot just from today's demonstration. That's all just from this last 40 minutes that we've been together. So if you're working with precious metal, it pays to think and measure and think. So that is the nuts and bolts of the idea. I've made these sample pieces with you this evening, so I'm just going to pop that up in the heart bowl. I've shown you the nuts and bolts of how to finish your locked bangle. You've got this piece, which is more than enough for a locked bangle on the wrist, and you've still, from this mega bead mix, got all of these available. Thank you so much for all of your kind comments today. I really appreciate you. That's very lovely of you to be with me and to learn with me here at Jessie James Beads. So you've got you've got lots of beads still available to work with, including these saucy little fellas. Look at that. It's a coated crystal hexagon with multiple different shaped facets. Now, one of the reasons I absolutely adore this is because the reason different shaped facets, you've got rectangles and you've got triangles here. When you're wearing a bead such as this, you'll be catching light in multiple angles, which I absolutely adore. You've got these little babies as well, and I love ceramic beads. So you get two types of ceramics in this mix today. Still got one of those brown ones available. Reminds me of ancient pottery. You get a couple of these as well, and I absolutely adore. I wonder, actually, if I can use them in the opposite. You can! Look at that! You've got so many ways that you can use these large spacers. Lots of different apertures to work with. How is that? Amazing. Deanna says, I love your accent. Are you from Scotland or England? I am from Shakespeare's Stratford-upon-Avon, which is dead centre in the middle of England. So you also have these fantastic squirrels. In my house we have to call them squizzles, because if you say the word squirrel, the dogs go loopy nutso. You've got these beauties as well, which have got very fantastic. Again, we're looking at different angles and different finishes. You've got matte, you've got polish. They're a gorgeous colour. So all in all, Into the Woods is the most beautiful bead mix. Absolutely super. Jessie James Bead says, those ceramic beads are some of my favourites in this mix. Super pretty. They are fantastic. Thank you very much, my darlings. I'm just going to pop you back up here. It's still me in my little dragon dress. That's the size of the bangle. As I mentioned to you, it's a little bit large. Look how far it goes down. But you can size that up to fit whatever you want. And when you're making a bangle like this, a solid bangle, you don't have to absolutely fill them with beads, because the joy is in the movement. If I show you the teeny tiny one, having those all sort of bobble around, I just adore the movement in jewellery. Is really exciting to me. I have been to England, Scotland and Wales, beautiful country. That's lovely. My mother has moved to Wales. She now lives there. I went to see her last week. Roberta says, love the dragon dress. Where's the dragon? Here he is. I can't do this in a mirror. There's my little dragon. Lots of flowers. Where did you buy your dragon dress? I got it from a thrift store. I don't even know who made it originally. I just love dragons. So, again, my precious loves, thank you so much for being with me today. That was Into the Woods, and I look forward to be back with you very, very soon. This month I'm going to be hanging out with you on the Spectacular Spooktacular with Jessie James Beads and Soft Flex. That's coming up next week, soon. It's on the events page, and I'll be back here on the Facebook Live in 2 weeks, and then next month, can you believe it? Can I show you? No, I'm not going to show you. You'll have to wait. I've got 2 projects at Winter Workshop. Hopefully you can join me. Very many loves and gratitudes to you all. Mwah. I look forward to seeing you again very, very soon. Bye for now.